the best feeling in the world, so why not take the risk? It allowed you to sort of like pivot your board and get more vertical. The ultimate point is when like everything just connects and there's just like, you're in constant flow with the wave. That allowed me to sort of like funnel through the barrels without getting caught in the lip.
All right, welcome to the Basis Podcast. We have Dylan Lightfoot, and I'm super excited because I just remember seeing this crazy footage, like point of view, J-Bay, Dylan just getting like the craziest tubes and like doing these sick turns, and it felt like I was surfing J-Bay. It felt like a video game, like a 3D simulation, except it's Dylan and it's not me, obviously, but it's just this amazing footage, and I would just thought to myself, man, number one, I want to go surf J-Bay someday. Hopefully not get eaten by any sharks. But number two was just like, it was so interesting. I feel like there's so much to learn from looking at that perspective. And so, yeah, I wanted to dig in with all of that with Dylan. But also he's a professional surfer. He was actually a wild card event at J-Bay. Obviously absolutely rips. Yeah, so very excited to have you. Thanks for coming on, Dylan.
Oh, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah. So first of all, I guess, I just want to get to the good stuff right away. And then I'm going to go all through kind of your background, your journey through surfing and all that. But let's just dive into these waves that you caught. I mean, they're just so fascinating to see that perspective. And I think, for anybody that's listening on, you're definitely going to want to check out the full video so that you can just see this perspective because it's wild. And then after that, we can get into the other stuff. So what I'm going to do is let's just play it full through just so you remember what this wave looks like. And then we can go kind of slow-mo through this thing here.
Oh, man, I get so excited to surf J-Bay when I see the footage.
Oh, my God, it looks so good. Just looks so freaking good. I mean, perfect canvas.
Yeah, this day was like, it was quite uncrowded, J-Bay. It was sort of a swell that we didn't really expect to be that good. And then my friend and I were like, let's go up the coast. Let's just, I've got my family home in J-Bay. Let's just, try our luck. And, man, we got so lucky. It was just uncrowded, perfect, 3 to 4 foot waves. And I remember this wave quite clearly. It was like everything just lined up for me. It was one of those waves that just had like the perfect pace to it.
Yeah,
a lot of waves are like very quick at J-Bay and you have to like race around big sections. And, it just was from start to finish. It had the most perfect pace. And I was able to just like go from one bottom turn to the next, and then into each maneuver. And it was just, everything linked up so nicely, and I was just like, wow, this is going to be cool with the footage. But yeah, I think with the GoPro footage, everything's kind of fickle, you're kind of relying on like so many elements, if like a water droplet hits the lens and then there's a bit of a blur or it's cloudy and, so yeah, when this shot linked up and I saw the footage, I was like, wow, I was very, very happy.
Yeah, it just looks absolutely gorgeous. And you know what? Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to slow it down even a little bit. So I'm just going to scroll through slowly here. Why don't you just walk me through kind of just like your bottom turn? So you're setting up for your bottom turn all the way into your top turn. So like what's going through your head? You just finished that turn. What's going on in your head right now as you're assessing things?
I think with J-Bay, you're almost always looking down the line because it's so fast. Like, you almost have to like look into the future when you're surfing J-Bay in a sense, because that like if you go for a huge rail gouge, you're not going to make the next section. So it's almost like at this particular point, I'm sort of assessing like what to do down the line. Like, do I sort of go for a maneuver where it's like either a speed carve or, maybe like a float the section, or it's slow enough to actually like, bring it all the way around, Those sections are kind of rare, it's kind of hard to find a section where you can just absolutely lay it back into the white water. But like I said, this wave sort of allowed it. So at this particular point, obviously, I'm looking down the line, I'm assessing the speed of the wave, and I'm sort of like trying to predetermine what maneuver I can do to allow me to get to the next section.
Yeah. Okay. And then you're going for your bottom turn.
Yeah. Going for my bottom turn here.
Yeah. And I think the thing to note here for people that are listening on is just like how low you get, right? Your forearm is basically gliding along the surface of the water, right? And
yeah,
you're just getting so low, and you're still looking down the line, and you know you're it looks like you're probably going to be going into just, you know, kind of that slingshot right back up to the top of the wave. I don't know if there's anything more you would add there.
Yeah, I think, you know, sort of how I've been taught to do my bottom turns is like sort of using that arm as like a pivot point. So, you know, you put it in the face, and then that's the point at which, you know, you turn and swivel off that arm, and then you're looking out to the section as to where you want to go. You know, it's so instinctive that it's like, you know, when I look at this footage, I'm like burying my arm and then going straight up, but it's sort of become more aware to me that like the point at which I put my hand in is where the point is which like I kind of like, you know, decide to go up and decide to go up for that like first maneuver, you know. So
got it.
Yeah.
And how are you thinking about your weight distribution during your bottom turn?
I mean, my weight distribution.
Or is it just like intuitive at this point? You don't even think about it probably.
To be honest, it's so hard to recall these things there. Like,
right.
It's so ingrained in like your intuition at this point. One thing I was quite surprised when I looked at this footage, I was like, my foot is so far back on the board.
Yeah.
And generally my pad is like on the tail as far as it goes towards the leash plug.
Yep.
So that was kind of interesting, is like the amount of sort of torque that I generate off my back foot after I pivot my right arm into the face.
Right. And does your foot normally land there, or are you saying that?
It does. It definitely does. But I think with J-Bay, because there's like kind of a bit of push, I tend to put my foot all the way back. Mm-hmm. So when it comes to like giving a proper gouge, it's like, I don't know, in the best position to sort of like hold that inside rail.
Yep.
But yeah, I notice when like I'm going up for a barrel, my foot almost shifts forward just to like, you know, try and keep that speed and momentum on your front foot.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, looking at this angle, it's so trippy and interesting.
It is.
Yeah, I love these shots.
It's so okay. So you're going up.
Yeah. So you'll see if you play it a little bit further. Okay, this was almost like a snap at this particular point. So yeah, I mean, it's kind of cool. You can see like I hit it, and then like as I come out of it, I'm like already looking down the line as to what's going to happen next.
Right. And you're just throwing this massive fan of spray, and I just the timing, you know, you're right up on that lip. It's like the coping on a skateboard rail, you know, and that's obviously what's. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, that's what when I saw the footage, that like was sort of one of the highlights, because generally when I do snaps with this mount on my back, it kind of like the water hits the lens and it becomes a bit fuzzy, but it was just so clear, and like it's just, I love that feeling of when you're coming off the bottom and you hit the lip, and it's almost like you've just hit the sweet spot and you're just sliding, and it just feels so good. And then all of a sudden it catches and you just like carry on going. And this was like one of those waves that we were, or one of those sort of waves and forms that we were trying to get, that we sort of were able to shoot that. And I was very stoked with it.
Yeah. And maybe let's break down kind of your decision-making process as well, right? So you've alluded to this already, but you know, why did you choose to do a snap here as opposed to a different maneuver on this section?
So I think on days like this, because you can kind of see that there's a lot less wind out of J Bay on this particular day. It was like very glassy. Generally, like days when the wind is gale force southwesterly, which is our predominant wind when we're having like a cold front that moves up the coast, which brings us swells. It's very hard to do a snap in conditions like that. So I think from this wave's perspective, like I knew we could potentially do snaps out there and it would feel okay. But in this case, I think because the section just allowed and the pace allowed it, I was able to do like a snap, with a few cars, which is really cool.
Right. Yeah. So it's that steeper section, and yeah, it just felt like the right section to do that wave, to do the maneuver. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Sam, what are you thinking, body mechanics wise when you go into your snaps? Is there anything you think about, I guess, is there anything you're focusing on, like any cues where you're like, okay, I got to remember to do this when I do my snap?
Generally, when I'm coming off on bottom, I'm looking up. I would say, a lot of things, or a lot of time when you're surfing out of J-Bay, you're almost like you're coming up for your snaps, but because the wave is so fast down the line, I've noticed a lot of people, they almost look down the line as they're coming out of their snap, like they've done it. And then instead of like looking down for like that split second and just regaining your balance over the center of your board, they're almost looking down the line. And then they would look down the line and the inside rail would catch, and then they would almost like fall over. I've seen this happen numerous times, especially guys at J-Bay that like don't know how to surf the wave, don't know how to keep up with the pace. They tend to always look down the line, but there's almost like a split second when you're at the top, you've done your maneuver and you're looking down for a split second. And as you like gain that center of gravity again, that's when you look down the line again and then carry on going. So at this particular point, I think that's sort of something from a mechanical point of view, doing a snap out at J-Bay, that I would take into consideration.
Got it. So you're almost committing to that point. You're able to commit to the turn a little bit more and not fully race it in a way.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, got it. All right, so bam, you do this beautiful snap, and then you're just pretty much going for your next one. And I think what's interesting here is, I can really see you just really sizing up the wave and like managing your speed. So you do these, smaller pumps just to figure out, as you're just trying to find that right position to do your next turn, right? Is that kind of what you're thinking about as you're going through there?
Yeah, for sure. I think, I try and minimize the amount of like double bottom turns I do out at J-Bay, or like waiting for a section. It's J-Bay is all about like speed maintenance, and coming through different sections. You got to have or know when to have the right speed to set you up for the next maneuver. So at that particular point, I try and make sure that obviously the section that was coming was maybe a little bit too critical, and maybe if I like hit it in that particular zone, I wouldn't have made it further down the wave. But if I know I just waited like 2 seconds just to maintain that speed, I probably would have come around. Well, in this case, I came around and then was in the perfect position to hit the next maneuver.
Got it. Yeah. Okay, so let's keep going here. Boom. Another snap.
But it was almost like that maneuver was cool because you can see that like the section slowed up, and my bottom turn was delayed by a few seconds longer, which allowed me to sort of like come into the section and wrap it back because it slowed up to the point where it allowed me for that maneuver to occur.
Yeah. You just got to really,
Yeah. And then it obviously, it allowed me to do that like figure eight where it was like the carve into snap,
Yeah. So, man, just beautiful surfing in a beautiful wave. So I'm curious, like, how has watching your own footage from this perspective, has it adjusted the way that you surf at all? Because a lot of times when you see footage of yourself, you're like, okay, I want to tweak this, I want to tweak that. And I think this happens at every level, right? But has that happened to you? Have you viewed your footage and you're like, oh, I want to improve on this, or I want to improve on that? Or hey everyone, it's Van. Hopefully you've been enjoying the podcast. Hopefully you've been listening to some good stories, getting some good tips that are helping you improve as a surfer. If so, make sure to subscribe to the podcast, leave us a review. It'll only take you literally a few seconds, and share it with your friends. That's the best way you can support me so I can continue to create awesome new content for you. So thanks. Or you're like, no, I just surfed that thing perfectly. It was just the perfect wave.
Not necessarily. That's a good question. I mean, I'm very critical when it comes to my surfing. So I will always look for sort of particular things that I'm not happy with in my surfing. So in this case, I like to give credit to myself that this wave was surfed really nicely. But
yes,
I think
definitely.
in other cases where the footage was not necessarily as perfect as this, I probably would give myself some critique for sure. Whether it's the land footage or this footage. But I think, when I first saw this footage, I was just blown away by sort of the way the board was positioned in the water, and you can sort of almost see how the rail cutting through that face on your inside toe and your heel side. That was sort of very interesting to me from an analytical point of view. Especially the displacement of water using, say, a round pin versus a squash tail. I've never really been aware of it and understood the dynamics of water displacement when it comes to a surfboard. So when I looked at this footage, I think that sort of was very interesting to me.
Interesting. And so what is the right craft to ride at a wave like J-Bay? Because you say that it's super fast. So you obviously need a lot of speed. I mean, this is probably the perspective because it's a GoPro, but the board looks pretty narrow. How do you pick your equipment? How wide is that board, and how much volume is on it relative, and thickness and all that relative to kind of what you might ride at, I don't know, a beach break or something like that?
Yeah, I think J-Bay's been a bit of a weird one for me. I must say, it's even though I've grown up there, I've always struggled with boards in a sense, because it's not like a heavy wave. It's not like a Sunset or a Haleiwa. You don't necessarily need a gun at J-Bay, but it's not soft. It's almost in between. So, when I was starting to surf supers more regularly when I was younger, I would always take out these boards that were round pins, and there was just too much hold, and it just felt a bit sluggish. So over the years, I've sort of developed a board where it's a rounded squash tail, and it sort of just gives you that combination of release off the top, hold during a rail carve, and speed down the line, just to give you the full combination of riding a wave out of J-Bay to the best of its ability, or that it has to offer. So I think, I don't think necessarily that you need a gun or a small wave board. I think it's almost an in-between. It's almost like if you want to get a small wave board that has a lot of hold, or an all-round board that has a lot of hold, that's the perfect board for J-Bay. And that's whenever I got a quiver of boards and I felt there was just too much hold at a beach break, or a wave that, it was small and it just didn't feel like it wanted to go, I kind of thought okay, let me just try this board out of J-Bay. And then those would generally be the boards that just felt great out there. Yeah.
So this looks like kind of your typical high performance shortboard. And that, because at a wave at J-Bay, it seems because you got good size, you got good power, you don't need the board to generate the speed for you too much like a small wave board, but it's not like you said, it's not like Sunset. So just kind of that in between perfect rippable kind of wave. And okay, got it. And so I'm curious,
for sure.
I mean, because obviously you're an extremely high level surfer, what,
Thank you.
what, you said that you were critical, but less on the critical side, but like what things do you focus on at your level?
I really enjoy flow. I think having an element of flow in your surfing, for me, I just think that is the ultimate point, is when like, everything just connects, and there's just like, you're in constant flow with the wave, you're in constant rhythm with the wave, and you're not doing double pumps, you're not trying to milk the wave for more than what it's worth. I feel like when I was competing, I was doing that a lot. I was sort of like over surfing a wave, and I just don't feel like, for me, that was how I wanted to surf, but I was just surfing to get the score. So when it comes to like being critical of my surfing, and maybe it's just because I've grown up at such a perfect wave, like if you surf J-Bay and you don't know how to sort of ride the wave to how it, or for what it offers, it highlights that sort of that inability to surf the wave. So for me, when I surf now, I just, when things flow together, like if I'm able to do like a snap, and come out of it and into like a lip line floater, and from that lip line floater generate speed, and then there's sort of an air reverse section, and I'm able to link those three maneuvers in with just like no double pumps. Like for me, I love that. I love that feeling of like pure execution without having to look messy, in a sense.
Right. I mean, did you just watch, Tom Curran at J-Bay surfing his first wave on like repeat as a kid, especially being from J-Bay?
Like that is a perfect example of just like, perfect surfing at J-Bay. And to be honest, it was his first wave. Like, that blows my mind.
That's so insane, right? Oh my God. His bottom turns in that section, I mean, they're just the most beautiful thing. It's so, and what he does with his head too, just like look straight to the beach and then go for that bottom turn and just like rip right up. It's just
insane.
Gorgeous.
I think there's guys that just have a knack out of J-Bay, like Mick Fanning. He's probably my favorite surfer out of J-Bay. Tom Curran, like Joel Parkinson. There's just such a flow element to their surfing, and I think that just appealed to me more than anything,
Yeah, man, that must be so good to just surf a wave like this with perfect flow and just like feel like everything fits together. And I guess, it's interesting when you say that. It must feel like this, I don't know, synchronicity with the ocean when you have that perfect flow. It's like your maneuvers perfectly match the wave and everything just lines up perfectly. That must be kind of the most beautiful feeling. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I think, obviously I was competing for a very long time. And as soon as I sort of stopped competing, it almost felt like I was surfing for myself.
Yeah.
And I think I sort of became a lot more connected with sort of my feelings for surfing and what I wanted to get out of surfing. And I think I sort of found like a bit of a connection there to what would bring me joy to my surfing instead of like winning heats, And I think that sort of, that feeling of connection with the wave and that flow element, that brings me a lot of joy these days.
Got it. Actually, you know what? This is something I'd be interested in diving in with you. So, you had to probably go from surfing perfect J-Bay to then surfing on the QS and just like 1 foot beach breaks. What was what was that like? That must have been tough, right? Or
it was very tough for sure. Like I think I definitely had a disadvantage in that sense because sure, JB is a perfect wave. You get a lot of repetitions on your waves. You get to practice different maneuvers, and I think you form a very like interesting style in the sense that like your surfing becomes quite refined, but the unpredictability of beach breaks becomes an issue when you're trying to compete on the QS. And from when I started surfing at places like, Pantene in Spain, Lacanau in France, Australia, Manly Beach, it just, that became very difficult for me. And yeah, it definitely was a bit of a disadvantage. And I started to practice more and more, but when you've grown up on surfing, point breaks, it's sort of like ingrained in you to like, wait for the best wave, you don't necessarily have to hunt because it's going to come in the exact same point, or a few meters out. So yeah, I think that was certainly my biggest disadvantage on the QS.
But it's so weird because, you go from J-Bay, then you have to surf like 1 foot crap at a beach break. But then if you make it to the CT, then it's back to the other approach, which is wait for the best wave because you're going to be at a perfect wave, or not a perfect wave, but, like a really good wave. And then you kind of have this whole mind shift then as well. It must be so difficult for, surfers to adapt to all that.
Yeah, it's pretty tough.
Yeah. So I guess, going, and I guess the hardest part must be like, oh, it's pumping imperfect at JB. I'm going to go practice at this 1 foot crap beach break. Like, did that ever happen where you like give up perfect waves to just go surf dribble?
Oh, so many times. I remember like being in or being in like Europe and doing that European leg. So you start in Lacanau, you go Pantene. I know I mentioned this, and then you go to Ericeira in Portugal, then you go to Morocco, but it's summer there. So, sure, the beaches are nice, it's warm, but the waves are 2 foot. And, I'm sitting on social media, just seeing perfect waves come through at J-Bay, and you're like, is this winning? Is this what I'm meant to be doing for the rest of my life,
No.
Or until I retire? Like, I don't know, it was definitely
That's
hard
rough
to watch that.
Yeah.
But I mean, I've surfed J-Bay as good as it gets. So, when I was traveling, I would just tell myself, like, you surfed it good. Like, I'd message a local guy and be like, hey, how was that swell? And he'd be like, it wasn't that great, just to get an accurate depiction of how it was, because everyone will be like, it's pumping. But I know there's a few local guys that'll tell me, like, nah, it actually wasn't that great. It was too south.
Yeah, got it. Well, what's interesting then, so going from surfing perfect waves and then having to adapt your style to like small, crappy beach breaks, what did you learn from that? How did you get good? I mean, because that's what you had to do in order to, compete at that level. How did you figure out how to surf small, crappy beach breaks? What was your approach and what kind of things do you think you learned?
So I think one of the most important things that I needed to work on was my quiver. Like my boards were very, very refined. They were very thin. They had like perfect for point breaks or when there's like a steep face to it, my boards were able to fit in those pockets perfectly and I was able to release. But as soon as it went like absolutely gutless, and I had to manufacture and look messy in my surfing, like that I felt I struggled with my boards because then I would just feel like I threw a lead weight off the back of my board. But I must say, I was in Australia and I actually got a few boards from Al Emery. So he's based in Byron Bay. I don't know if you know Adam Melling. Adam Melling used to ride his boards. And from there, I kind of like felt like, oh, wow, like, these boards are great. Because so just just riding and getting the feel for Australian boards by an
Yeah.
Australian shaper, that sort of changed my approach. But it became very difficult for me to get boards from Australia. So I've got a local shaper now that's obviously I've been with for a good few years now, and he's helped me sort of like build on that small wave board quiver. And yeah, other aspects I would say is like obviously putting the time in. Like I would go to Seals Beach Break, which is a beach break just like 30 minutes from Jeffreys Bay, and I'll just put as much time in as I can and like beach break waves. And when I would stay in Cape Town, I would actually surf a wave called Musenberg. It's very soft. But I think just putting that time in. Another element that comes into, growing up in Jeffreys Bay is there's hardly any left. So it's, me surfing at J Bay, like my forehand was, really good, I felt, but going left was just, that was also definitely a challenge. So we also have like a wave sort of just on the other side of Super Tubes, maybe like one or two beaches across. But it was like a 2-foot beach break. So whenever it was working, we would like, or not 2-foot beach break, it was like a 2-foot kind of like, how can I say, sort of like a rock shelf that went left, but it wasn't spectacular at all. But whenever it was breaking, we would just like be like, oh, we should go surf it, just to get that practice in. So yeah, on the basis of that, it kind of like sort of helped me improve my small wave surfing and beach breaks and obviously left.
All right. So going from surfing perfect rights all the time to surfing small, crappy left, were there any unlocks for you that helped you get better going backside? Do you remember any breakthroughs or things like, I made this little adjustment and it really opened things up, or was it just putting the time in?
I think one of the biggest adjustments that helped my backhand surfing or my backhand snaps, because I think when you're competing on the QS, you want to look explosive. You want to look like when you hit that lip, you're throwing spray. And I was actually in Huntington Beach, and my friend Christian Science, he said to me, he was like, oh, just drop that right hand when you're doing your bottom turn, and it'll allow you to sort of like draw out your bottom turn a little bit more and come sort of off the bottom and more vertical to get like underneath that lip. And I don't know if it's like you almost delay your bottom turns when you drop that right hand, but it allowed you to sort of like pivot your board and get more vertical and allow you to sort of hit the lip and project more spray off the face or the section you want to hit. And
interesting. Can I ask a question about that?
Yeah, sure.
So you're saying, so you're a regular footer, so you're using your backhand and touching it down, so your right arm, right? And so this is your outside arm, and you're doing this during your bottom turn. So you're kind of getting your backhand closer to the rail as you're doing your bottom turn.
Yes. So it's kind of like if you see guys sort of bottom turning on a massive wave and wanting to sort of wind it up and hit it, you'll sort of see them like grab their rail and like almost act like as a leverage just to like pivot off that bottom and then allow them to sort of come up and then hit that lip. It's sort of the same sort of action, just on like a 3-foot wave. You're sort of dropping it down, and instead of, I was bottom turning and my hand was like here, where it should be like down here, and when I saw the footage and the difference between the two bottom turns, I was like, wow, this is night and day kind of thing, and yeah, so from then I sort of like tried to focus on dropping that right hand. But it's weird because some surfers don't necessarily do it, and their bottom to top turns look perfectly fine. But for me personally, that like helped my backhand snaps quite a bit.
Interesting. And so that just allowed you to get more vertical, and obviously with your backhand snaps, I think you can generally get a little bit more vertical on that. But wow, that's really cool. Okay. Anything else?
Yeah, I think in at Huntington Beach in particular, it's almost like, I don't know if it's the south walls, but they sort of like come down the beach and the left kind of bend away from you, but then the right bend at you. So, you're kind of like coming off your bottom turn and you're like looking up, and it almost feels like the wave, because it's bending at you, there's not much power. And when I was sort of coming up for these bottom turns and not coming deep off that bottom turn, it just didn't allow me to sort of like hit it nicely. But as soon as I did that, it was like, yeah, it just made a difference. That I was like, wow, this is quite valuable. That was probably one of the biggest takeaways I took from surfing or improving my backhand surfing.
Got it. Cool. And you obviously had a good measure of success. You were in, you got a wild card spot at J-Bay. What was that like, surfing and making it to that level? You probably were surfing against your heroes as a child, probably, right? What was that like?
Yeah, it was definitely one of the best experiences of my life. I look back at that memory fondly, and geez, I wish they would bring back the event now and the trials, because the trials was what I want to compete in. But for me, that was just amazing. I was very nervous. I was young at the time. I think I was like 18 years old. And my very first heat, it was like Kelly Slater and Mitch Cruz, who was a good friend of mine. But just being in a heat with Kelly, I was like, this was absolutely surreal,
Yeah.
And I think I wish the waves were better. The waves were a little bit weird that day. It was like kind of like an onshore crumble. And it wasn't the cleanest swell, but the memory of just like being like surfing in front of your friends and your family, and they all supporting you and rooting for you, like I'll remember that to the day I die. That's for sure. Like, as one of the fondest memories.
Wow. And you'd have like your whole hometown crowd cheering you on. You're the local guy, and oh man, that must have been epic.
It was amazing. Hey. Yeah.
So did Kelly play any mind games on you, or?
No, I was doing pretty good in the beginning. Like, I had two waves, which I think were okay. And then I can't remember. I had my second best ride, and then I was paddling back out, and I was like, oh, I'm kind of in this. Like, I could be Kelly. And then obviously Kelly does what he does, and he came flying past me in a day where there was no barrels, but he got barreled. And he came out in front of me. I was like, oh, okay, like, just calm down, Dylan. You're not gonna beat him in this heat. But it was so cool. Like,
oh man,
regardless if I came second or third in that heat, I was just so stoked.
Right. But for a second, you're like, I might be Kelly Slater. That was going on in your mind.
Yeah. But I think you need to be in like a wave pool setting, and the time's running out, and there's absolutely no waves coming. Someone just presses the button. That's the only time you can beat Kelly Slater.
Right. So mentally, though, was there any, like, how did you deal with just stepping up to this whole nother level and competing at this world stage against your heroes? And I'm sure you mentioned you were nervous, but was there anything that helped you get over that nervousness, or?
I was so young at the time. Like, I struggled to deal with my anxiety when competing. Only like towards the end of my surfing career, I found that mojo as to how to relax and just let go, and like sort of let the ocean dictate how you should perform in a heat. Because I was just, I was spinning. I was like, my dad said I was shaking. Even Kelly said in his interview that I looked nervous. So I always rise to the occasion though when I have like a lot of anxiety, which I'm sort of grateful that I have that attribute. But only towards the end of my surfing career in 2019, like that was the best year that I had, which was just before COVID. I sort of started speaking to a psychologist in a sense. I don't know if she was really a psychologist, but she helped me sort of let go of, I'm very focused in the sense that like I have to do everything right. I have to train, I have to eat correct, I have to surf a certain amount of hours a day. I have to like, and I treated it like a job. And I think I lost the fun element. And as soon as I started just like incorporating that into my surfing again, it was like things were just coming my way. And, when it gets to like 5 minutes left in a heat and, you need that score to make it through, the wave would just come. And I'd be like, whoa, like things are just falling together for me. And I had a lot of heats where I just sort of let everything go and just kind of use my intuition instead of like, okay, this is where I'm going to sit. This is, I need to catch the first wave of the heat and I need to do this maneuver or I need to do that. I was just like, I'm going to go out there, surf my heat and feel out the conditions, kind of have like a vague idea of what to do, but it's not cast in stone. And that helped my surfing from a competitive point of view for sure.
Interesting. And I think that's, most people aren't going to be surfing, at your level, but I think it's still highly relevant to anybody. You could be a beginner surfer and you're out there for the first time in some, proper waves and you feel intimidated in a lineup. And I think what you said is just kind of spot on and it's probably going to help. I've definitely had those moments on, surfing myself where I'm out there and I'm like, man, I'm not getting the waves I want. This crowd is this and that. And then I just like, all right, you know what? I should be grateful to be out here. And then things just started going my way. And I can totally see that. Interesting.
Yeah, I think when you're surfing or free surfing, you kind of paddle out and you're there to sort of vent and just become relaxed. And I think a lot of people go out to vent that in the surf, and sometimes they sort of, they're not in that flow state. And I think after you've caught a few waves, you eventually start to like break into that flow state. It's almost like if you paddle out and you get one wave off the bat, it's almost like, okay, my surf's done. Like I'm content with whatever else happens because I got that bomb. And that was kind of like sort of what I was putting into my competitive surfing. It was almost like I've caught that bomb before I've even paddled out into the heat,
Yeah.
So yeah.
And then usually when you catch that bomb right off the bat, then you're just in the rhythm and then they just keep coming, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
Because then there's no pressure. You're just like, well, I'm out here to have fun,
Yeah.
It's not going to be necessarily a bad surf, but I've just come out here to have fun,
Yep.
So that's sort of the approach I try to sort of have with my competitive surfing was like, just go out there, have fun, regardless of the result. It is what it is, It's not going to help if you put the pressure on, because putting that pressure on is just going to make you overthink it and just like, it's just a spiral out of control.
Yeah. Well, speaking of bombs, was thinking we could walk through this barrel that you got because that looked pretty sick and definitely a bomb.
Yeah. So this wave is in the Mentawais, and it's a bit of an unpredictable wave, but man, I just became so in tune with this wave, and I knew exactly which waves were going to hit the reef right and barrel. And oh man, I get so excited when I see that footage. And yeah, I remember it. It was just like, you're so deep and it's so shallow, but when you just make it past that like foam ball section and make it through, that feeling is just, it's insane. I don't think there's a better feeling in the world than getting barreled. But yeah, I remember like the turbulence underneath my board, and I was like, oh, is it going to hold? Is it going to hold? And then once you just get over that little foam ball, it's like, it almost feels like a video game. You've made it through like a rocky patch, and now you're like on the other side.
Yeah, for sure. And so You mentioned you had finally figured out the wave. Was there anything particular when you're, looking at these waves coming in at you? And obviously every wave is a little different, but, just to give people an understanding of like the things that you look for in a wave.
Yeah, I think this wave in particular, when a swell will come in, I know that the wide ones would kind of hit the reef and either go super quick, or the shallow ones would kind of like not have this, deep barrel section. It was almost like in between. Those ones were the ones that kind of like hit the reef, had a deep enough barrel section, and allowed you to make it. But I guess you're just looking at like, where the wave is coming, where the sort of steeper dark water is versus like, the flatter sections. And yeah, I think knowing the reef and knowing the way the swell is wrapping in is just so important for determining if it's going to be a good wave. Yeah, that those two dynamics at this particular break definitely allowed me to choose the best waves up there and, not hit the reef when I didn't make one.
Yeah. And so then you see the wave coming in, you paddle, and you get in. Like, what's going on in your mind as you're like, let's start from the beginning right here. What's kind of, I'm going to go a little slower here. So like, what are you studying? Are you kind of making adjustments as you're going through this? I mean, I also noticed like,
Yeah,
especially in contrast to the other wave, like your foot is almost like in front of the trackpad here, and to generate speed, obviously. But
yeah, I was going to highlight that fact, like, my foot when I'm sort of racing down the line and in the barrel, it's so much further forward. It's almost like, you're putting your momentum on your front foot to drive you forward to get through that section. But yeah, it's when I want to get barreled, there's almost like a happy medium as to like getting to the point where, you want to be as deep as possible, but you don't want to be at the point where you're not going to make it out. So it's like you're kind of looking for that point of equilibrium where you're trying to get like maximize your utility out of the wave pretty much. And I think, yeah, in that case, it's almost like you're paddling into the wave. You're kind of trying to determine if you should take a slow bottom turn and then pulling up underneath it, or if it's going really quick, just like try and give one or two pumps and sort of race through it. So I think in this case, it's sort of like that speed adjustment. What do I need to do to get to that point where I can maximize my tube time?
Got it. Yeah. And I mean, you are pretty deep here. I mean, you can just see that thing throwing, and that looks so far in front of you. I don't know if it's the perspective here, but as you see that thing coming, are you, what's going on in your mind there?
Well, I either know it's like the lip hits me and I hit the reef, which I think is like a lot worse than trying to make it. So if I don't try and just go for it and try and make it out, like I'm going to feel terrible for myself for like not trying to make it through,
Yeah.
So regardless, at this point, I'm like, I'm in this, I got to just stick to it. And, the worst outcome is if I don't make it, then I hit the reef. But if I do make it, then I come out, and I'm going to try my very best not to fall. Because this wave is extremely shallow, like, but I guess that's what produces the best hollow waves,
Right.
So, yeah.
Man, and you are so committed. I'm just realizing it looks like you're stepping on your leash right here.
Yeah, it's insane. Like I cannot believe how far forward I go on my board when I'm in the barrel. Yeah, it's so instinctive. Like you don't think these things through, I just like it happens naturally. And then sometimes I'm like, oh, did I actually do that? Like, do I do that? And
Yeah.
so I think highlighting the fact that like you mentioned earlier that, what did I take away from this footage was like these small little elements. Like this, for me, I was like, wow, that is almost a whole foot forward in front of the grip pad than what I was in my videos out of J-Bay. But in saying that, this is a longer board. I think it's a 6'2", versus my board at J-Bay, I think it's around like a 5'10". So yeah, it's very interesting to see this angle and the sort of foot placement I've positioned my feet.
And you're, what drove your decision to ride a longer board at this wave?
So I think it's just the extra rail line, and because it's so powerful, like just having that bit of extra rail line can get you through these sort of turbulent sections. Like obviously now that little whitewater section there is going to make a chandelier, and I think just having that longer ball with the round pin just allows you to just have that hold when like a shorter board would just skip out,
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's just all hold really, and it
Yep.
allows you to sort of paddle into the wave a lot sooner. Yeah.
Yep. Makes sense. And then as we get closer to this chandelier section, I mean, I feel like 99% of people would just eject at this point, looking at that right there.
Yeah.
And so how did you,
Ejecting.
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. I said ejecting at this point would mean that you would hit the reef. So it's like you gotta just go.
Nice. And so it looks like you're lifting the nose of your board over that chandelier. Is that your kind of what you're doing from just to get over it, or?
I'm not sure, to be dead honest. Like I think it almost seemed like I did, right? But I definitely can't remember if in the moment I was like, oh, I'm gonna lift my nose over this thing.
Yeah.
Usually when I see a chandelier section, I'm like, I just got to go through it, and
Right.
hope for the best. Because a lot of the time, it's when those chandelier sections come, it's hard to like keep your rail line. Yeah, it's kind of like, I don't know, how can I compare it to like riding a bull? I don't know. It's just like it's so unpredictable, and once you make it over that, and then you're in the clear water, then you're fine. As soon as you hit the clear water again, you're fine. But yeah, to hit that sort of whitewatery section and try and make it through, it's so unpredictable.
Yeah. Well, I think it goes back to what you were saying earlier, about how you beat yourself up if you didn't go for it. Commitment, in a barrel is just so key. I mean, I think the best barrel I ever got, I saw the section throwing in front of me and I just was like, all right, I'm just going, and I lock in and, I just backdoor it. And I was like, that was the best barrel I ever got, But
Yeah.
it's so easy to be like, oh, especially if you're somebody that's getting used to surfing barrels, normally you're avoiding the lip, right? And you're going away from it. But in a barrel, you're actually going towards it. You want to go through it. So that's a big mental
Yeah,
shift that people have to make.
for sure, for sure. I mean, like I say, it's the best feeling in the world, so why not take the risk?
Never know till you go. Yep, exactly.
Exactly.
All right. And then, yeah, you just get right over the section. Oh, that must have been the best feeling in the world when you got to the other side of that thing.
Yeah, no, I'm stoked, hey. Man, and we waited hours on end every day for just to have this wave work. Because when it works, it's almost like people don't come surf this side because it's quite far away from the main camps. So yeah, we would just wait there for the right tide, the right wind, and as soon as those elements aligned, it's almost like the wave just came to life. Yeah, man, I
Well,
love this wave.
looks like you scored it. Okay. Now for a left barrel.
So this wave is literally on the other side of that right-hander, which, yeah, it's so convenient. um, so yeah, this wave, I mean, geez, I don't know if my backhand technique is as good as my forehand, but I'll try to comment on it. um, yeah, it was, we hadn't had many opportunities to try and get footage on my backhand. So when we saw this, we were like, wow, this is so unique. We haven't seen anything like it. But this particular wave, it was kind of easy to sort of line up a barrel. It was, you would just sort of take off late and just hold your rail, and you would know which ones would like throw on the shelf because it was kind of like a slabby wave. And then at the end of this wave, there's actually like a rock coral head that sticks out of the water. So you kind of want to eject as you get out of the barrel section, otherwise you land on the rock.
Oh man. Oh yeah, I think I see it.
Yeah, you probably do. You probably will see it. But yeah, that's definitely a bit sketchy. But it was a really fun wave.
Man, talk about commitment though. It looks like there's 3 sections on this wave that you make it through.
Yeah. I was lucky to luck into this one.
So technique wise, I mean, there's a bunch of stuff going on. Is there anything you'd comment there?
Yeah, I would say one of the biggest takeaways that came with my backhand barrel riding was when I pulled into the barrel was never to look down. The tendency, I feel like when I was trying to figure out my backhand barrels, was to look down, and then wherever your head goes, your body goes. So as soon as I was doing that, I was kind of like drifting towards the lip. But if you kind of just keep your gaze at that point where it's like, it's here at like this sort of crevice in the wave, and you're looking up, where your head goes, like your shoulders sort of like torque open, and that allowed me to sort of like funnel through the barrels without getting caught in the lip, and sort of allowed me to like hug the face. That was probably the biggest thing from a technique perspective when putting into barrels on my backhand that I learned.
Yeah. And you're grabbing your rail, your back knee is mostly down, so you're in that pig dog position, and it looks like you're dragging your hip in the wave. And are you doing that just to manage the speed? Yep.
Yeah, for sure. I think dragging obviously your left hand in this case and your hip, that's sort of such an advantage you have in your backhand to regulate your speed. And I think even at J-Bay too, like goofy footers, they can. My friend Steven Sway, he's a magician. On his backhand out of J-Bay, he drags his like hip in the face and like is able to position himself in barrels that you just wouldn't expect to be in there for so long, and yeah, I think it can be an advantage for sure.
Yeah, it's so interesting, because at a wave like Pipeline, for example, I mean, I think most people, they're more comfortable surfing on their forehand. So they're like, I would want to get barreled on my forehand.
Yeah.
But, people talk about how at Pipeline, the goofy footers have the advantage in a way because they can just manage that speed. You can slow down on your backhand in a way that you can't slow down on your forehand.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Yeah, for sure. I totally agree with that.
But the problem is most people aren't comfortable surfing on their backhand, and it's scarier, taking a big drop on your backhand in some ways mentally, even though when you drop down into that pig dog, you're kind of in a more stable position. So it's like this weird conundrum anyway.
For sure.
Cool. Well, perfect wave. I'm sure you just want to go right back there. Dude, I want to go there now.
Yeah, the Ments is just like, it's my favorite place on earth besides for J-Bay. Yeah, I'd love to go back. Wow.
Yeah. Well, we're reaching time here. I feel like we've covered so much. Was there anything that you wanted to touch on, or any shout outs that you wanted to give before we close?
Oh, not necessarily. It was great to chat to you, man. Yeah, thanks for having me.
And it was so cool to see your perspective on those waves. And yeah, just hear more about your surfing. I'd love to have you on another time at a certain point. You're just super fun to chat with. But thanks for joining.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Hopefully, I'll have more footage of the Ment and J Bear, and then we can dissect it then.
Oh yeah, I would love to do that. Okay.
Till next time.
Hey everyone, it's Van. Hopefully you've been enjoying the podcast. Hopefully you've been listening to some good stories, getting some good tips that are helping you improve as a surfer. If so, make sure to subscribe to the podcast, leave us a review. It'll only take you literally a few seconds, and share it with your friends. That's the best way you can support me so I can continue to create awesome new content for you. So thanks.